So welcome to Ken. Ken Eyerman is with me today, and I'm so excited to have him with me. Ken is not only a yoga teacher, but a Feldenkrais Method practitioner and body worker. And Ken is actually one of the people that I've did yoga with first in Egypt many years ago, and one of the first teachers that I practiced with in my yoga journey. So for me to be talking to a great, as in Ken Eyerman, is quite, I'm feeling quite, quite blessed to have you, and the fact that you are going to share some of your work with our students. So welcome, Ken.
Thank you, Natalie. Yes, a good memory of those wonderful times in Dahab, which I enjoyed so much. So. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Ken, you're originally from New York, but now living in London, right?
Yes. Wow. Yes, that's true. Yes.
So Ken and I met in Dahab, Egypt in the early 2000s, where Ken hosted his yoga holidays and stayed at our hotel. And so Ken was really one of the first yoga teachers, as I mentioned, that I started to practice yoga with. And I found something interesting out about Ken today as I was sort of stalking him online, is that he actually published a book. So that's, I actually saw your book is for sale on Amazon, Ken.
Good. Yeah, try and get a first edition if you can. They put up follow-up editions, which are not so beautiful as the original. If you can get an original one, which sometimes I looked myself recently, and I'm not sure if you can still get the first editions, but they're they're real beautiful photographs by a wonderful photographer.
So the book is entitled Massage, right?
Massage, yes.
Coming from your history as a massage therapist or a therapist in that work.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, which is the way I approach yoga. I mean, my hands are what have gotten me everything, really, from the beginning.
Yes.
It's kind of it made me, I teach yoga from a point of view of a body worker. So the whole area of touch, and especially now when sort of distancing a little bit, self-touch.
Yes.
Being able to direct people's attention and touch themselves. So my hands have really, that's the beginning. So it's interesting, yeah. And so that led me to the whole Feldenkrais work, which is about both, really. It's about the movement, and it's about, there's two sides of it. There's a hands-on side, and there's also a movement side, a class where you go to a class. So it suited me really well because I can do both within that same context.
Mm-hmm. So
I still do. I have a private practice in London.
I'm hoping to get the original and have it signed by the author. So,
good.
That's kind of what I'm aiming for, but it sounds fascinating. So Ken, when did you first find out about or start practicing yoga?
Well, I always say I'm a product of the San Francisco '60s. I was living in New York and America in that time in the mid '60s was going with the Vietnam War. There were various things going on. The whole hippie thing started, and I went out to San Francisco, and San Francisco was just full of wonderful things, and so everything was there really. And I was dabbling. I was looking for a creative outlet for myself. I think I was kind of destined for a kind of almost a suburban kind of environment, life, and then things changed, and I went out and started dabbling and wanting this creative outlet. So I started doing some yoga, and I started doing dance. Dance was my real passion at that time, but I got into it very late. So I was looking for other possibilities, and yoga was one of them. And then Feldenkrais himself came to San Francisco in the mid '70s, and I didn't do his training then. He did his first training in America in San Francisco, but my neighbor was doing it, and I trained, and I worked with him, and so that was kind of the beginning. And so that was really my root, was dance, and then Feldenkrais, and dabbling in yoga. But when I moved to London, then the whole thing kicked off. I completed the Feldenkrais training in London.
Yes.
And yoga was taking off, and I worked with some wonderful yoga teachers in London who invited me out to their centers. And so then I started traveling, which really suited me. So I started going out to Crete, where there was a particular teacher, and in Lesbos, where Angela Farmer was, and these various people who I came to, really, they came to me first to be fixed. You know, they had injuries, and so my specialty in hands-on work in my massage practice, I was able to fix them, and then they invited me out. I'm almost an accidental yoga teacher in that sense, that I just kind of with so much in my life, I just kind of fell into things. And, you know, suddenly I was in Dahab, and that was kind of almost, you know, because I'd been there with the dance company in the early 80s.
Wow.
I went to Dahab in the mid-80s, when it was just coming back. The Egyptians were just taking it back. And I was with the dance company. They had finished their tour in Israel, and we came over from Eilat, and I fell in love with Dahab. And I, you know, years later, I wanted to go back, and I went back in the 90s and as a tourist. And then the opportunity to teach there came up, because I knew Barbara Gordon, who was in London. I knew her from London, and she was working at the Blue Beach, and I came. So that's a whole, you know, lots of stories in one right there. But, you know, it's, it's kind of my story. New York, San Francisco, London, and then the traveling world.
And then international.
The world is, I see myself as an international person, you know. I don't see me.
That was actually one of my questions, that or one of the things that I wanted to share with our yogis, is that how well traveled you are, and that really I see you as a pioneer in that whole yoga travel sort of movement. And then what I wanted to ask you was to tell us about some of the places that you visited around the world, and what your sort of favorite destination is, or I'm sure it changes, but what is your favorite destination right now?
Well, I have various ones. I've been going to particular islands in the Greek islands for the last 30 years. I go every year. It's a community of people that I just love, and so it's where I started teaching in 1989, really, when I first invited me out, and there were some great yoga teachers there who I worked with, Derek Ireland, and these various Ashtanga. I was doing Ashtanga Yoga in those days, combining it with Feldenkrais work. And he invited me out to Crete, where he has a center. And so I was doing the Feldenkrais work in the afternoons, and then there was the Ashtanga in the mornings. And I just kind of loved the physicality of it, even though it was many ways against my sort of nature, which was more relaxed. And so that was a beginning. And I love going out to India. You know, that was a great, and I'm going in January to India. I go every year now, and that's just because that's where it all kind of, you know, that's where yoga begins, and it's so fabulous to teach there. And the respect they have for Western people is wonderful. Western people who are teaching yoga, they really love it. You know, so
beautiful.
It's wonderful. And I go out to Turkey, which I love as well. I travel in Canary Islands, and Dahab was, you know, I love, for me, that was going back to my hippie roots in those days. It was just like, wow, this is, you know, just the wonderful kind of, and the sea. I love the sea. So wherever I go, it's to the sea, really. I got to work in California as well at the Esalen Institute, which is the original center. Yes. And that was, you know, just a wonderful place to be. And that was after I had lived in London for a while. They invited me back as a guest practitioner to work there. And I could dabble in all these great thinkers that had traveled through the Esalen Institute, which is in the most beautiful place on the Big Sur coastline of California. So that was a real honor. You know, living in London has been such a treat. It kind of opens up the world in a way. It's very central to the world, from my world anyway. So
absolutely.
So these are kind of.
So I really think the one little pin missing on your world map is South Africa, quite frankly, and which then brings me to the point of making sure that we get Ken Eyerman out to South Africa as soon as possible. And it is something that Ken and I have been sort of talking about, and his partner Emily, that we've been talking about this desire to bring Ken out here. So we really do hope that you make it out to South Africa at some point in this near future.
I hope so too. I would love that. I would love that. And you know, there's a wonderful sea there as well. You know, that wild sea.
Absolutely.
So and that whole kind. Yeah, I would love that. I haven't really explored that much of Africa. So, you know, we were meant to go out to Kenya some years ago, and it was cancelled for some various reasons, and terrorism and things that came up. And it was we were really disappointed. We had a safari kind of organized and stuff. So South Africa would be wonderful. But open up Africa to me in a way.
It's the gateway, really. So we will introduce you to Africa by bringing you to South Africa.
Wonderful. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Because I think yoga is about, you know, yoga is about travel. You know, it's about traveling within yourself. And so I love that I love turning up somewhere and just creating something with a group of people.
Absolutely.
That's for me the best way of teaching.
And really, like my feeling as well is it's beautiful to practice yoga in your everyday life setting. But when you can go into a retreat sort of environment, that's where the real beautiful work is done, where you can sort of retreat out of your normal day life and really immerse yourself fully into the practice. And it's not just, as we know, it's not just the asana, it's the full 8 limbs and full practice of yoga, and really to immerse yourself into that, I find is what's so beautiful about a retreat or a holiday.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. To get people away and get me away from my everyday experience, and just try to, you know, deal with an environment, hopefully in a beautiful place in the world, as South Africa sounds like it is. So yes, absolutely. The longer the better. The longer the retreat, the deeper the work goes, you know.
Absolutely.
So it's so good that
I do think that it's probably one of the best gifts that anyone can give themselves, is to gift themselves with that time of that, like, complete retreating from your everyday life and experiencing something so different.
Absolutely, absolutely. So people now online, we're teaching, and I'm saying, you know, you can get a feel for my classes, but it's not like being somewhere beautiful where you have all that going on too. You can just let go of your everyday habits. You know, so much is about changing habits. My work is about changing habits, and people, you get into a habit, I get into habits. So when I go away, I can, you know, I have to deal with other things, other cultures, and it's just so nice to go into another culture. Absolutely. And get to know that culture a little bit by being there. So it's, yeah, I love that. And often included travel, you know, when I'm there too. Often we teach and then go off somewhere and enjoy.
And explore.
So, yeah.
So Ken, you trained in the Feldenkrais Method, and I'd love to know a little bit more about it. And I know you mentioned that you didn't first do your training in the States, but then you did it in London. And so I did a very little bit of reading, and it was Moshe Feldenkrais, correct? Who was the founder.
That's right. Yep.
What is Feldenkrais Method?
Well, that's, yeah, it's an open, for me, it's, I mean, it's different for different people, but for me, it was a very, he dabbled in so many things. He was an engineer, scientist, and had injuries. And worked out his injury. He was also a martial arts guy, so he was kind of sorting out a knee problem that he had, and he created this technique built around about habit and subtle movement, and we call it movement with awareness. Yes. Where you really go deeply inside and learn how to move out of that place and heal. So I use it as kind of a real healing tool, but it's a very open-ended. He was just dabbling. That's what I liked about it. I'm not a great one for trainings, and I just kind of, I like the idea that I could put my own stamp on it. When I did the training in London, there was all these early Israeli, it's an Israeli technique. They were all there. He had died by that point. I had worked with him a little bit when he came to San Francisco, but I'm almost happier when I got to work with some of his students, which took it all in different directions. And they were all very humble and all very lovely. And, you know, there are hundreds of kind of, they call them lessons. They teach these kind of lessons.
Okay.
And for me, even when I was doing very physical yoga, always started my class with these lessons. You know, it's about the body and just moving, subtle movement, rolling this way, rolling that way, feeling this, feeling that. And it's like the ultimate anatomy lesson, really. You just kind of know your body from instinct rather than learning the names of the bones. You learn them by moving and feeling yourself, and then you learn to see, and you become, you know, like a healer in a way. I don't like even using that word, but being able to see people's stuff, you know.
Yes.
And so it fit right into my bodywork practice that I already had, and just deepened it so much that I learned another way of looking at the body. So it's, you know, it's kind of an open-ended technique that gives you wonderful insight.
I find it so fascinating that you were doing Ashtanga, which is, out of all the forms of yoga, sort of the most vigorous taxing of all the forms of yoga, and then learning that other balancing side. I find that so amazing how you were drawn to that. So
it was it was a challenging sort of strange for me. When I started the Feldenkrais training in London, I ran up to the teacher, this wonderful small Israeli woman, and she said, you know, I lied down in the front of the room. There was 100 of us there, and she looked down and said, "What's your name?" And I said, "Ken." So, "Oh, what a beautiful name." And I was in heaven, but at the end of the class, I ran up with my book, which also has very strong images of me working on dancers. Because I also had a very physical yoga bodywork practice, almost like rolfing. And so I just like, oh, look at me, I'm the imposer of energy. Their thing is all about understating, and everything is do less, do less, do less. And she said, "Oh, now you'll write about the transition from being this imposer to doing softer kind of." I feel like I'm on this journey of a transition. And with the Ashtanga, it was when I did that, I was inspired by this man who was teaching, Derek Ireland, who was a very inspiring guy. I've never gone by to it since then, but I was working with him, fixed him, loved the physicality, invited me out to his center in Crete, and I saw the need there for the people who were doing Ashtanga, needed this softness. They didn't really take to the Feldenkrais. It was such a contrast.
Yes.
And I thought they were really armoring themselves so much that they didn't want to feel. They were just kind of, you need this armor, but you also need to feel. And it set me on this journey of wanting to find the bridge between these two areas of physicality, which I love, which I love in the dance world too. To get dancers to lie down and be subtle is not always easy. It's when they get injured that they start listening. So it's kind of, you know, I love that contrast. It's just kind of the way I'm made up, really. Even within the, you know, the Feldenkrais work, I'm almost sometimes too physical, and they scold me and say, you know, you look at what you can't pull on. You got to do less, and it's a constant kind of, but it's through those struggles that you kind of make your own way, really. And I sort of feel like I've made my own style, really. I don't know if I identify as being a yoga teacher or identify with being a Feldenkrais practitioner. I'm just myself, and I think it's important to people to become themselves, really.
I think that's what we discussed when I spoke to you recently about when you sort of go into the teaching and you start to get a taste for the different styles of this sort of work, that you sort of join and take out of each one and sort of formulate something that becomes true to you, you know. So for me, I started off with, in my training, I did Hatha and Ashtanga, and then I went through running marathons, and then found, and through injury, and found yin yoga. And now I'm sort of like taking out bits from my experience and everywhere, and creating a marriage of that almost. So I'm sure.
I think that's so important. I mean, I used to train people in body work, and all those people are doing different. They don't do what I do. I taught them to be free, really. You know, I taught them to find their own. And I think that's a good teacher will do that. It's not easy for a teacher to let their students go, but I think it's really important. You know, I worked in the dance world. It was just certain choreographers, as with yoga teachers, like, various techniques where they try to hold, they can't hold their good students, you can't hold them. They have to go off and do their own thing, and you just have to let them go. And good dancers, good news is similar. They have to go. People have to go. They were great when people do hold the tradition and stay there and do that. I love, I was doing this morning, a friend teaching a Feldenkrais, really pure Feldenkrais class online, which I really enjoy. It's nice when people can do that, but I come out of it thinking it's not me, it's just not me. I have to go my own way, and I love people like that in all professions, really, who, these are, I always say I want to be more like Feldenkrais rather than be one of his disciples, so I've kind of gone my own way with it, and I don't like joining groups in that way. All techniques, they get precious about it. The Ashtanga world, this is the way you do it, and
or the Iyengis, or the...
well, I was going to mention Iyengar, and I worked with Angela Farmer, who was one of the great early students of Iyengar, and she broke away from him because she now, what I see she does now, you watch her online, she's in her 80s now. My heroes are all these, people like a woman in her 80s, gone a completely different way. And seemingly Iyengar, she told me one time that he just chased her off the stage because she wasn't doing what he had taught her. She wanted to go her own path, really, and it's wonderful what she's doing now. And especially as you're getting older, you have to adapt as well. So go ahead.
No, it's interesting because as we sort of flow into this part of the conversation, it just makes me think about like the responsibility almost of teachers and new teachers to sort of further the work, because we're in this constant change. And I mean, we're both in lockdown on opposite sides of the world right now, in a sort of situation where there's this fluid change. We have no control over what is going on, but yet it's almost evidence again of the fact that we need to evolve and we need to change. And if I look at sort of what's happened in the sort of press over the last years with our gurus that came from India or the founders of yoga, that really I think it's a responsibility to continue the work but to evolve it, and to not just follow and sort of be stuck in that box.
Absolutely, yeah. Especially once the founder has gone, you do need to make it something else. It has to evolve, like you say. These great thinkers, they had to start somewhere as well, and they didn't. We just really have to take this work. Yeah, everybody we have to evolve, exactly. And then, this kind of opportunity now that we have being in this lockdown. For me, it's kind of I don't know, it's been an opportunity in many ways to expand my own thinking in a way. You have to use these opportunities. As frustrating as I'd love to be out there teaching in all these wonderful places, but I've had to, yogis, we have to learn how to go inside and be with ourselves.
Okay, this is the time.
I've always lived this way. I've always lived this way. I've never had, never been money oriented and all this. We just kind of learn how to survive, really. And so I'm putting it all to good use now.
Yes, and you learned what the truly important things were in life. So the transition into this space hasn't been that hard because of that, I believe.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's going inside, really. And, we're going inside ourselves, and even more so now, and getting, like, people are talking about nature and all of that. I mean, I've always lived, again, this way, where I'm even within the city of where I live, I'm in the park every day, and I'm looking at the birds and getting more in touch with these aspects of life. And in London, we're very lucky. We do have a lot of parks and things. So I feel very blessed in that way. I always say this. People say, "How did you move to London from San Francisco? It's so beautiful." And I say, "Well, the sun, is inside. You really create your own sunshine." And it's inside yourself, so I think that's a really important.
And I think
so wherever you are, you take yourself with you.
That's so poignant. What you just said is that I think a lot of people, and I did ask a couple of people that I interviewed, like what were their tips for people in lockdown of sort of how to deal with it. But I think you've sort of already said that. It's just that being okay with going within, being okay with yourself. And, you know, if you've been avoiding yourself for these last however many years, the universe sort of had a plan that now is the time, you know, now is the time to go there. Yeah.
It's an opportunity, to take it as an opportunity. So I think, absolutely. I grew up in New York City where, you know, my nature was very different, and I just kind of, I could cope. I love living in a city because I'm kind of a relaxed person, and I can go inside. I hang out in the cafes, and, you know, I don't have to get into the whole kind of, I've never had that kind of job. I've never had a job in that sense that I had to go to an office. And dancers say that too, you know, their job is as a dancer. You know, I love creative people in that way. And these are the people I work with in London too, creative people who they think outside of the box in a way. And being amongst people, for me, is so important. So that's why I've had to embrace the internet now too, because I love being, you know, I'm a private soul, but I love being amongst people. So these contrasting things for me is important.
I think it's beautiful. I think we've all had to sort of face some sort of fears or blocks or whatever. I think it really shadow side self stuff sort of came out for everyone, and I think it's just amazing that we sort of go into that and we don't try and hide away from it and just embrace it, what it is.
Well, absolutely. Yeah. And I realize there's so much out there now too. There are so many people doing interesting things, and, you know, it's an opportunity for a lot of us who work like this. And so they're putting our work out there really and connecting around the world. Yeah. It's a real beautiful opportunity. So I'm seeing more and more the opportunities of the internet, which I've, you know, kind of stayed away from for all these years.
Yes.
Yeah, it's giving us this chance.
I can't wait to go to the Johannesburg or the OR Tambo airport and collect you from the airport when you come and visit South Africa. I'm hoping it's 2021 or at worst 2022, and get you out here so that you can come and share your knowledge and your teaching, and we'll bring a group together and bring some of your students out here as well and go on safari and do this thing. So I'm excited.
Thank you. I love the idea of that as well. It'd be lovely to see you personally, and also to be there, for all our memory, you know, all the memory of the wonderful trips we had in Dahab and
so you again sparked my memory, because Ken and I spoke to each other recently, and we suddenly had a flashback of one of the craziest things that we've done together, which was be stuck in a snowstorm in the Jordanian desert on the way to Petra. So
that's right. In our shorts, and we were dressed in shorts. A motley group of us from all over the world, you know, sort of traveling. We couldn't believe our bad luck, really, in a way, until we arrived at that wonderful hotel in Petra. And thought, wow, how wonderful this is! You know, the movie booked into the best hotel.
Life is for living, man. Life is for living. Definitely get out there and live, and you can carry on your beautiful work. I'm fascinated by Feldenkrais right now, so I'm going to come offline and speak to you about my hip. So
okay, good. I look forward to that.
Thank you so much for sharing with us, and we'll be sharing links. So if anybody's ever finds themselves in the UK or wanting to go on an adventure with Ken, then we'll be sharing all of those details with our viewers as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you.